Well, let's see. Different location, different wardrobe, different cocktail, different day. I've tried to make this video at least 6, maybe 8 times. I won't bore you with all of the things that have gone wrong with it, but gonna try it here downstairs in the house. That way I'm not bothered with wind or passing chuckleheads on dirt bikes screaming up and down the road. So something of a more controlled environment here, and I'm going lower tech with this simple little action camera. So no lapel mic, no transmitter with a battery in it, no receiver with a battery in it, none of that sort of stuff. Just fully charged camera, space on the memory card. I'm hoping this will work. Today I want to talk about solar power here in the townhouse. I've got solar power set up in the shed that I built out at the property. That shed is the subject of the next video, and I'm kind of saving the best for last, which is the backhoe. Boy, that's just a tragedy. If you're watching this because you're wondering how things are going for Patty and Warner in Puerto Rico, well, Patty is clearly smarter than I. She's not here. She's taking yet another travel nursing position, so she's in Greensboro, North Carolina right now. But while I'm here, Puerto Rico is knocking me down and kicking me in the head. That's kind of the way things are going. We're fine. I'm not. We're okay. It's just one thing after another. So today is solar power, and solar power here has worked pretty darn well ultimately. So let me take a sip. This is a Pina Colada. I hadn't made a Pina Colada here, we got here 2 years ago, and I didn't make one in all that time. And it is the signature drink of Puerto Rico. I'm remedying that, but I'm actually drinking these because I want the can that the pineapple juice comes in. I'll explain that some other time, not even in this video, some other time. But I bought the equipment. So the equipment for solar power is usually comprised of 3 components. The first, solar panels. Got to be able to generate the solar electricity. The second thing is an inverter. It's actually a lot more than just an inverter, but it's usually referred to as an inverter. And it converts the direct current, DC, power generated by the panels into alternating current, which your house uses. And then it feeds that energy into the house to supplement or replace the electricity that you're using off the grid. And depending on the style of the inverter, it may have something in it called a transfer switch that lets it export excess power back to the grid if your local utilities permit that. This is something called net metering, and we can do that in Puerto Rico. The last item that may or may not be part of a solar power setup is battery backup. If your grid's really reliable, then you don't really need the battery, but our grid down here is not known for its reliability, so we have batteries as well. So because shipping costs are outrageously high, number one, I didn't buy solar panels and have them shipped down here. It would have doubled the price of my panels. But I did buy the battery and the inverter. You can get batteries and inverters on the island, but solar power technology is developing very, very rapidly. And the stuff that you'll find on the island is truly, it's outdated. So I bought for here 2 products manufactured by EG4. The inverter is the EG4 12 kW PV. I won't go into the details of that unless you really insist. But it's it provides plenty. It has the potential for providing plenty of power to run this townhouse here, depending on just how much I push through it with the solar panels. I paired that with an EG4 battery, their Powerwall. I think it's the Powerwall battery. It's one that's rated for outdoor use. So both the inverter and the battery are mounted outside the kitchen wall there, on the outside of the townhouse. So I bought those and paid the shipping because I really couldn't get what I wanted here on the island without bringing it in. So I went ahead and did that. Those arrived, I think, in December, and I went ahead and put the mounting bracket up for the inverter. And I thought about and actually tried to pick it up and put it into place. And I'm like Toby Keith sings, right? I may be, as good once as I ever was, or something like that. It's just, I'm getting to that point where what I could do in my 20s and 30s, I'm nearly 60. I'm not doing that stuff anymore. But my head keeps thinking, oh, sure, you can do that, and getting me into trouble. So anyway, it was all prepped, and then in January, we got our first visitor to Casa del Windborne. Mr. Cameron Tilley came down for a political science conference, Southern Political Science Association's conference in San Juan. So he spent a few days here, and I didn't charge him rent, and I took him out to eat a couple of times and all this, but I made him pay because he helped me put that inverter in place. And I've got a jack. It's called, the style of jack is a high lift jack, and it will lift up to 7,000 pounds, as much as 5 feet into the air. So it could certainly handle this inverter. And so we put the inverter on the jack. I jacked it up. Mr. Tilley was guiding it as it went up the wall, and I'll make it sound easier than it did. Up it went and hung on the bracket. Eventually it did that. Great, that's all set. Then is the next thing is the battery. The battery weighs over 300 pounds, but remarkably enough, that one was easy. That one was one I could and did do by myself. I didn't pick it up, but I could just walk it. You lean it over on one edge and walk it over, lean it back to the other edge, walk it over. And I had poured a concrete slab. It's about 8 or 9 inches thick as it wound up, but poured a concrete slab there for this thing to sit on, and there's a mounting bracket on the wall for it as well. But it was a simple matter to just sort of waddle it over to that slab and then lean it over and put legs up and lean it back, put the legs up, and so it was easy. Then I hooked the two of them together, which is nothing more than running the wires from the battery into the inverter, to run the 48 volt power from the battery into the inverter. And then there's a communications cable between the two and a ground wire, and that's it. And so, hey, the two are connected, but the inverter's not connected into the house. And I've done a lot of wiring in my time, and though I'm not an electrician, I'm not a licensed electrician, but I'm pretty good when it comes to pulling wire. I've done a lot of this sort of stuff, and I know the National Electric Code pretty darn well. And the issue here is, so normally I'd be happy to do this. If we were back in Virginia, I'd have hooked this thing up, no questions asked. That would have been simple. Here, I keep seeing things when it comes to the wiring that I don't recognize, and they look awfully sketchy to me. But within the National Electric Code, there are 3 very powerful letters, a very powerful 3-letter acronym, AHJ, which stands for Authority Having Jurisdiction. And that simply means the local electrical inspector. And if the local electrical inspector says, this is local practice and this is acceptable in this locality, then it's good, regardless of what it is. And so there are there seem to be common wiring practices that are done here that I would never do, but seem to be, according to the electrical inspectors, seem to be okay. Well, when power comes in, this is all pretty standard, and I know what I'm looking at least when I see this. Power comes into the meter. From the meter, it goes into the main box, and it's called the main box because that's what it has. It has the main breakers, 200 amp breakers, and nothing else. And then it goes from there. Power goes from there into the service panel, where it's distributed throughout the house. So that's typically the way things work. For us, we've got the meter, the main, and then the previous owner installed a manual transfer switch. And the purpose of a transfer switch is to transition between different sources of incoming electricity. So what does that mean? Well, in its sort of normal operating position, power flows from the grid through the, actually kind of bypassing, it does kind of flow through it, but the transfer switch and into the service panel. But if you take the switch, and it's a manual switch, and you switch it into its bypass mode, then you can do something like, then you've isolated the grid. The grid is no longer coming in. We're completely off the grid at that point, and you could do something like hook a generator up. And that was the idea, is that when we would lose power here, if I bought a generator, I could start up the generator, hook it into the transfer switch, throw the switch, and now I'm supplying the house from the generator. And more importantly, power from the generator can't feed back onto the lines, so it can't hurt the linemen when they're trying to make repairs. Anyway, that's what we've got. Meter, main, transfer switch. But in that main box, I'm looking at it and I see what looks like a white wire coming in and 2 or 3 black wires coming in. And I'm not really sure what that's all about, but I know white wires are neutral, black wires are hot. And I know that with the inverter, I need to bring power from the grid into the inverter, and then I need to take power from the inverter and get it into the house. And so I'm looking at these wires here and I'm thinking, well, maybe these will work? I don't know. But I don't know what I'm looking at because this is Puerto Rico style wiring. So I know a guy. I know a young man. He's a handyman. His name is Mickey. Nice guy. Came out and did some truly, it was some simple plumbing for me, but it made more sense for me to pay him $50 to do it, and then he had to go around and get all of the parts and all of the stuff. But while Mickey was here doing the plumbing, he said that he had done some solar work, number one. Number two, he said he had a friend who was a licensed electrician and who could come out and help with a solar install. So I got in touch with Mickey and I said, hey, I mounted the inverter, I mounted the battery, I've got them hooked up. I need to hook these things up to the grid and to the house. Can your electrician friend help? And Mickey writes back and he says, yeah, sure, happy to help you out. I'll be there Friday afternoon. So Mickey comes out Friday afternoon, pulls up in his van. He hops out. It's good to see him. Hopping out of the passenger side is a guy who does not immediately fill me with confidence. He's wearing flip-flops and some ratty old shorts, and he's got a collared shirt, but it's unbuttoned all the way down, and some floppy hat, sunglasses, and he's I was going to say he's unshaven. Well, so am I, but he's worse than I am. He looked he looked groovy. You know, he reminded me of the photojournalist character in Apocalypse Now. This guy, played by Dennis Hopper. I think that character didn't have a name. I think, in fact, in the script it was photojournalist. But yeah, it reminded me, looked like him, acted like him. I just thought, oh boy, this is an electrician? Well, no, he's not an electrician. He is a self-described solar power expert. And I didn't need a solar power expert. I understand what I've got here. I understand what needs to happen. I just don't understand Puerto Rico wiring, which is why I wanted a Puerto Rico electrician. But this guy was just, oh, this is great. Oh, this is, yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, he's not an electrician. And I know more about wiring. I very quickly realized I know more about wiring than he does. But the handyman actually, although he did solar power installs, he never really did the wiring. Not to the grid. So he didn't understand electricity. This is sort of new for him. So I'm looking at this solar power expert. I'm not going to use his name. He didn't even use his name. He used a nickname. I won't even give you a nickname. But I figure, okay, I can talk with him. I can bounce ideas off of him. I can explain what I see and the questions that I have. Maybe he's got some answers. No. So, I said, okay, here's the meter, here's the main, here's the manual transfer switch. I opened up the cover for the main panel, and I said, here are the breakers, and we've got these wires here. You can see the black wires, the white wires. Maybe, we can pull, hot wires, AC, out of here from the grid, and maybe these go into the service panel. I don't know. And he says, yeah, it could be. I don't know. And he had no clue. Meanwhile, he's drinking my beer. I'm thinking, this is not good. Well, anyway, eventually I look at him and said, look, you're the one who's going to be doing the connections. I said, I'm not sure what I'm looking at here. That's why I asked for an electrician. He said, well, I'm not an electrician. I said, yeah, I know that. I said, but you're the one who's going to be doing the connections, so you're the one who has to decide, whether this is safe or not. Oh yeah, this will be fine. This will be fine. So he and Mickey went off to get some supplies. They came back 2 hours later because it's Puerto Rico. That's kind of what happens. And they started sort of disassembling the wires that were there in the main breaker, in that main panel. And when they did, I noticed that. Before they did that, I noticed that at least the white wire went up into the upper left corner, and I could see that there was a grounding lug there, or maybe a bus bar. It was difficult to tell. Long story, but anyway, that seemed to terminate, and that's okay because that's neutral, and that kind of makes sense. The black wires all seem to be kind of connected together, and they kind of disappeared into the corner. Well, they pulled all of those out and pulled them apart, and each of the black wires had white tape wrapped around them individually. And I went, oh. And I said, these are not hot wires, they're all neutral. They've all been recoded, right? And this is perfectly acceptable within the code. Perfectly fine to take white electrical tape and turn a black wire into a white wire. That's fine. So I said, all of these are neutral. None of this is going to work. None of this is going to help us. So we put it all back together. And then I lifted the panel to the manual transfer switch, and the solar power expert went, oh my goodness, look at all of that. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? And he said, I had no idea that was there. And I said, I told you, it's a manual transfer switch. I just thought it was an empty box. All right. So I'm looking at it, and it's not difficult to figure out, where the lines from the grid are coming into the transfer switch, where the lines are coming out of the transfer switch and going into the house. And I said, okay, we can pick these up and feed the inverter, and then AC out from the inverter can go into here, and it'll work. Yep. So they made the connections, and it was finally it would work. And in fact, what I could do is, while the grid is on, the grid power simply flows through the inverter, so nothing changed. But with the transfer switch, I could isolate the inverter, and I did that. So I shut power off from the grid, and now the inverter was tasked with charging, with supplying our needs here from the battery, and it did. It did. Boom, done. Simple. So I said, okay, that's great. That's exactly, it's functioning exactly as it should. I don't have solar panels connected to it yet, but I've essentially got whole home battery backup at this point. And if we lose power, the inverter will immediately switch over to the battery, and it will supply us from battery, and when power is restored, it will immediately switch back to the grid and charge up the battery again. This is fine. Now, it turns out that the inverter and the battery weren't really talking to each other all that well, but I knew that was an issue with some of the settings. But the self-proclaimed solar power expert just decided, well, I'm going to just unplug stuff and see if that does anything, and then I'll plug it back in, or I'll unplug something from here and I'll plug it back in over there, and he's just sort of shooting blind like this. And I went, whoa, what are you doing? And he said, well, maybe this will work. No. And he disconnected the ground wire between the battery and the inverter, which is necessary. Oh, you don't need this. I'd never installed that. Get out of here. Get out of here. God, I was frustrated with him. Anyway. So the next morning, I called up customer support. They talked me through the settings so that the inverter knew exactly what kind of battery it was dealing with, and it went, oh, you're an EG4 Powerwall, okay, and it was all set and up and running, and everybody was happy. So at that point, we didn't have solar power, but we did have battery backup. Okay, at this point, I'd probably better call it quits for the solar power video. Otherwise, we're going to be here for about an hour. It's already, my guess is at least 20 minutes into it, and I'm halfway done. So I think what I'm going to do is break this up into two parts. I hope you don't mind. But it kind of makes sense. This is a reasonable breaking point. We've got, at this point, the inverter installed, the battery installed, everything is connected properly. We've got, in effect, whole house battery backup. The next big project is going to be getting solar panels and getting them mounted up on the roof, and that's going to take a little while. So I'm going to break it here. This will be part one of a two-part, I guess, video series on solar power here in the townhouse. As always, like this if you're so inclined. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm amazed we're almost at 100 subscribers. That just continues to shock the heck out of me. It'd be nice to hit that mark just because, there it is. Most importantly, comment below if there's something that I've mentioned in the video that you didn't understand, or you want me to explain a little better, or if you know something about solar power and you're wondering, did I consider this or did I consider that, or do I know about this or that other thing? By all means, please, share with me. I could use the help. Heaven knows I could use the help. But of course, I'm not limited to to conversations about solar power, the subject of this video. Though it's kind of nice if you're on if you're on topic. But if there's something else that you want to know about that's going on in our lives, what is it that that we think about what's going on here in Puerto Rico about this or that or the other thing, by all means, feel free, ask, and because I really have hoped that this would be a bit more of a conversation. I know it's a little difficult to do that given this format. I'm sitting in an empty room, sitting in a chair, talking to a camera. It's not really much of a dialogue, but that's our hope, is that there's a little bit more of give and take in this. I mean, there's plenty going on with solar power, with the shed that I've constructed, the continuing saga of the backhoe, just all sorts of things. But let me know if there's something that you would like me to address. I'm happy to do it. My former students know that was sort of my shtick. I'd come to class ready to go, but if they wanted to talk not about the subject of the class, but something else that was important to them, I figured it's their time, and if that's how they wanted to spend it, that's how they could spend it. None of that was going to be on the test, but if they were pretty happy and confident with where they were in terms of their having gotten their work done and they were ready to go, and instead they thought their time was better spent talking about events of the day, okay, I'll do that. So many of I'll talk about whatever's on your mind. Just all you got to do is ask. That's what the comment section is for down below. So please leave me a comment. Last video I put together, I had a bunch of those chuckleheads. Just they were acting like 6-year-olds racing, to get into the car. I'm first. No, I'm first. No, I'm first. Just, please don't do that. But and then of course, if you're chatting with someone and they say, hey, I've been thinking about ordering Patty, and I know they moved down to Puerto Rico, but I kind of wonder what's going on. Let them know. Share this channel with them. Share this video with them, so that that we can have this conversation with even more people. All right. So as promised, I'm going to cut this right here. The end of part 1 of a 2-part series, as it turns out, on solar power here in the townhouse. Stay tuned for part 2. It's coming up soon. See you then.